Hey everybody, and welcome to another deck tech for Opus 13. This one I cannot take the credit for. This is actually a list made by my good friend Alex Whiteside. You may know him better as the Jellyfish Guy. So he is very much an aggro player, and so his eyes lit up when he saw this brand new Viking card from Opus 13. And I have to admit, I didn't really give this card much look when I first saw it. I was like, I don't know, it seems kind of high-rolly. I don't know how successful it is, but I've seen it used to pretty good success in quite a few different decks, some of them using ice as well for snow. This version is going to be mono water. So what this Viking does is when he enters the field, you'll reveal the top 5 cards of your deck, and if you reveal a Viking of cost 3 or less among them, you get to play it straight to the field, and then you'll return the bottom into any other order. Now, obviously, to make this consistent, we're going to want to fill it out with a couple of the Vikings. These Vikings are 2-cost ones from Opus 1. They'll draw you a card when they enter the field, only have 1,000 power. And then we also have our 3-cost Vikings, which are pretty standard from Opus 4. 2,000 power, but they're going to draw you a card both when they enter and leave the field, so going to get a lot of value out of that. And of course, what Viking deck would be complete without Layla? Layla can pull out any of these Vikings straight from the break zone, play it right to the field. Now, when you're lucky and you're living the dream, what happens is you Layla Viking into this 2-cost, you flip 5, you reveal another 2-cost, you flip 5, you reveal the final 2-cost, you flip 5, you reveal this 3-cost, boom, you've just got, what, 5 bodies on the field, you've drawn a card. Alex is very much the type of player, too, he has no issues doing that turn 1. Like, if he has a chance to do this turn 1, he's 100% doing it. And what's nice, too, is that unlike this Viking, which is a 3-cost, since this is a 2-cost, you can just pitch a single card from hand, get it right to the field, and try to see if you can get your chain going. And, you know, when you go aggressive like that, a lot of folks they don't want to have to deal with that. They're sitting there trying to set up backups, and suddenly you can have 5 forwards on the board already, which is really nice. So, no denying it can be a little high rolly. I've seen it whiff a few times, but even if as long as you hit a single one of these 2 Vikings, I think you're still pretty satisfied, because what you're still getting is, let's say if you do it off of Layla, this Viking, one of these guys. So you've got 3 bodies on the board, and you've drawn a card, regardless of which one you hit. So here's some things we use to help follow it up. 2 copies of Cagnazzo. It's a mono water deck. Anyone who played back in the day know how dangerous Cagnazzo was back then, and since it's really easy to flood the board with a lot of people, Cagnazzo can come down for very solid amounts. And in particular, here's kind of the thing too, is that you're not necessarily even looking for Cagnazzo to just completely wipe their board. But if they have, let's say, some 5,000, 6,000 power forwards, Cagnazzo comes in and he shrinks them all down by 4, you know, when they're just 1 and 2 costs, you can just push over the top of them with these Vikings, which is really nice, or force out a trade with the Vikings, which is, of course, going to benefit you. Another way to capitalize on that board presence, we've got 3 copies of Cloud of Darkness. Again, if you get loaded up with a big board, Cloud can come down, easily delete something for 10,000, 12,000, 8,000, whatever. And then, of course, on attack, she's always that threat that she's kind of pushed through every single board. To go with that is this new Agrias. 3 copies of her. She's an EX burst. As long as you control a princess when she enters the field, you'll get to draw a card. And then if you control Avelia as well, you get to choose a forward, shrink it by 7,000, which, again, fitting in with the Viking theme, even if it doesn't kill it, if it makes it so weak that they're having to trade it out, you know, with this Viking, that's all to your benefit. So, following that up, Alex wanted to put in a lot of one-ofs. He really likes his spicy one-ofs. So 1 copy of the Legends of Dawn from Opus 8. Some people only like to play this card with haste. I have to admit, I've kind of fallen into that trap, but it is still a nice threat, especially, again, early. If you put him down, it is very much that, hey, you need to answer this. Like, you can't just let me swing in with this with Zidane. I'm just going to start drawing cards. 1 copy of the Tidus Legend from Opus 7. What's really interesting about this card is it has back attack. So when it enters the field, you can either activate all water forwards, which you can have a whole board of Vikings, or you can just give any water forward 2,000 power to the end of the turn. That includes him. Be warned, it technically says all water forwards, so should your opponent be playing water, it will include those as well. But you can get 3 backups out. Your opponent comes on their turn. Boom, Tidus comes out back attack. Pretty nice. Ash is just a generically good water legend. In particular, her reactivation will come up with Princess Sarah, which we're playing, which Princess Sarah will always be water in this deck, so that's the only element. So you can use Princess Sarah, buff all your forwards by 1,000, go to attack phase, Ash can reactivate the Sarah, tap Duller again, give another 1,000. Suddenly you've got a Layla who's 5. This Viking's a 6k on his own. Really nice. And then Ash is good beyond that. 1 copy of Strago. Sometimes it can be hard to let the stars align for this one, but it can also be really nice if you can find the right card. You bring them in, you bounce a forward of theirs, and then you get to play a character, including backup of the same cost. So really fun when the stars align. And then, of course, one of the biggest threats to this kind of deck is a Valafor, Athena, Philia, any kind of big board ping. So something like Cecil is really nice to help completely protect your board for that. And now, when Cecil comes out, they have to turn their attention to him, and they can't focus on this little swarm of Vikings coming at him. Some of the summons to help round out. 2 copies of Cucullin the Impure. It's an EX burst draw card at its worst, but it can take out key abilities, which is really, really nice. 2 copies of the Leviathan, which again can make any of these Vikings surprisingly resilient. This guy gets up to 6k, he blocks, hit him with Leviathan, he gets to stay on the field, and they just suddenly couldn't get through it. Makes Cagnazzo unreasonably hard to kill, and at damage 5, it of course has a great power spike. And what Viking deck would be complete without 3 copies of Famfrit the Darkening Cloud? You're more than happy to sack off any of these Vikings for any forwards they have, so Famfrit's always going to be a good trade for you. And we've got 1 copy of Big Famfrit as well, in those cases when you really need to get rid of 2 forwards. So, help even out our backup line. 3 copies of the new Princess Sarah. Can search out any job prince, king, or princess. In this deck, that's going to include our Princess Sarah backup, which again, we can get immediately. We'll turn into water. No color issues there, and then we can use some of those buff mechanics I was telling you about earlier. And 3 copies of Ovalia. Now, this is supposed to be the Legend Ovalia from Opus 13. You can see that in the deck list link below in the description. I apologize, I don't actually own any of those, so I had to use the old Ovalia as a proxy, but no, this is the new Opus 13 Legend Ovalia. So that Ovalia, if a tactics character leaves the field, you get to draw a card. So if Agrias goes, if Agrias comes in, she's in, she'll get all of her effects. And in particular, what's really nice is her Aegis special, so that you can dull Agrias, or dull Ovalia, spend the special, give a forward haste, which sometimes can be relevant for a surprise, you know, oh, you're dead all of a sudden. But in particular, it's really nice with these cards that have entry effects, such as Agrias, such as Layla, such as your Viking, Cloud, Cagnazzo, and probably Alex's favorite combination is to use it with Veritas of the Dark. 2 copies of this. Had to use a proxy, apologize. So you have Veritas. Let's say you're swinging with him. They've got an 8k. They decide to trade. You cast Aegis on him, and then Veritas will trade out that forward. He exits. They'll have to get rid of a character, and then the Aegis trigger will replay him to the field. Now they're going to have to lose a forward based on his entry effect as well, and then they're just sitting there for his exit ability as well. So a really good combination with those 2. 3 copies of Opus 5 Una. We like this just for the EX burst. It's nice to get a random bounce, help shrink their board. And this card has always been, and probably will always continue to be good for abilities that have break zone effects, like Veritas, like, not Cagnazzo. Or, I mean, if you were facing an opposing Aegis, it'll never go to the break zone, so it completely stops that. So anything that, you know, has a break zone effect when it dies gets something. Una completely negates that. Finally, a couple one-up backups. Hilda is really nice with the Vikings, as well as the Opus 12 Scholar. So Scholar lets you dull 2 forwards, and then you draw a card for each one you dull. So you can put out Lay the Viking, play Scholar, dull them both, and draw 2 cards. Hilda's going to draw you a card for every forward you control, up to 4. So if you open with Hilda the Viking, you can get a chain. You've got 4 guys, put down Hilda, reload your hand with 4 cards. Feels just kind of silly. 1 copy of Summoner, cheap water backup to put down early, and it just lets you cancel summons. Alchemist, another cheap early water backup, but lets you convert a card in your hand into an answer later in the game, which is really nice. And last but certainly not least, 1 copy of Waka, get another Anthem, get another 1,000 power. So again, if we've got Waka and we do a Princess Sarah buff with the Ash, suddenly, you know, this Viking's 7,000 power. So that's the deck. All credit goes to Jellyfish Guy. It was entirely his idea, but I thought I'd just show it off here. And yeah, these Vikings have, like I said, proven to be really fun, especially if you do go aggressive early and you just put a bunch of them down, because, you know, if you run into Athena immediately or Shantoto, yeah, that's not going to feel so great. But some decks, just people aren't ready for that level of aggression, so it'll, of course, kind of depend on what you run into, but that's what it is. You can leave any comments below and let us know what you think. Bye!